Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing today, all my beautiful shadow people? We're going to start our practice today with the journal question. And with journal questions, some people find it more useful to write a question down and then answer it, where other people enjoy taking the time to just sit and think about it. And if you're the kind of person that has answers come to them over time, feel free to take the question with you. And when answers come, you can always come back to this practice. So with these practices, first thing we need to do is find the shadow, and then we're going to work with it and put it to bed at the end. So we have 3 parts to practice. But the first part, the journal question, is really just about finding the shadow in the first place. Because there are certain parts of ourselves that we are not aware of for many different reasons. Sometimes they're buried intentionally, sometimes just the way we've grown up. They were never brought to our attention. But looking at these questions and digging into them and finding out what answers come to us are a good way of kind of realizing the truth that might be right in front of us, but that we're not aware of. I'm sure all of us have had the experience of clearly seeing people's problems, but our own are so much harder to see. Obviously, because the human mind doesn't always want us to come up with solutions to problems so that it can keep being in charge of what's happening to us. But we need to move deeper than that with our shadow work. So the question for today is, what am I afraid of? And to be completely honest, this question is going to come up throughout your shadow practice ongoing, because realistically, fear is an underlying emotion that relates to most situations in humanity and most of the choices that we make in life, even if we're not aware. But maybe asking yourself what I'm afraid of is a hard question to start out with because it's kind of vague and it's kind of big. So I will be including a link to a website at the bottom of this posting. We're going to use this week the website findthelight.com with 2 T's on light. And the page I'm going to include has a nice infographic on inner child wounds, which is a good place to start with our fears, because a lot of times the fears that we carry in our mind are actually related to things that we're not aware of from our childhood that have programmed us to look at situations a certain way. So I will include that. But as you're writing about what you're afraid of, the most important question in all shadow work is always why. So just telling yourself what you're afraid of won't give you much information, but it's definitely important to start digging down into the reasons behind it so you can start discovering what is motivating your actions in everyday life. So take some time to do that. Feel free to pause this and dig into it a little bit. Feel free to come back after. But once you feel like you have worked out the question for yourself and you're starting to notice some fears seem a lot bigger than others, if you're writing down more than one, then we move into the next part, which is the practice of becoming aware of the fear in our body without trying to understand it with our mind. And that might seem a little confusing because we often feel like we can only interpret things through our mind, which in some sense is true because our mind is our processing center. But there is a way to move into the body that allows us to feel things fully. And it's really important to do this in shadow work because a lot of the emotions that we experience actually get trapped because we think about them instead of feel them. So it kind of creates a disconnect, a dissociation, which is a psychological word that maybe we don't investigate enough, but it's pretty common in many people to do different forms of dissociation that separate us out from the actual experience of what we're going through. And when you're younger, it's common to do this to avoid trauma or to deal with trauma. But as we get older, sometimes this habit becomes so dominant that we even do it for minor uncomfortable experiences as a way to avoid any emotional discomfort. So in order to do this, what we do is close our eyes and we take a few deep breaths. And we're going to go back to the question, what am I afraid of? And you're going to take the answer that seemed to resonate with you the most. And you're going to move into the part of your body that fear seems to live in. Some people notice this maybe in their chest, their shoulders. Some people are going to notice it in their face, sometimes their stomach. You might even notice it in your hands. Wherever it is in the body, you need to move into that area. Take a few deep breaths. Try to feel that area as much as possible, as if you're living there now. So if it's in your chest, you're sinking deep into your chest. And don't worry about trying to explain why it's there or what it is specifically. You're just going to work on almost pulling it into as great a focus as you can, sinking into it, expanding it, allowing it into you as fully as possible. And this is really just a first step in shadow work. In future weeks, we'll dig into processing it a little further. But the most important part of shadow work is just awareness, because as we become aware of trapped energy and trapped emotions, we start to be able to process that energy out instead of letting it be stuck, where it can cause things like anxiety that never seems to leave, or tension in body parts that causes pain and sometimes illness. So as you're breathing, accepting and expanding that sensation, just try to be fully there without telling the story of it. If you need to take more time to do this, you can always come back to it again any time of the week. Anytime you notice an emotion come up related to fear, you can start moving into it. And then once you feel you've processed enough of that, it's time to come back to the body. So now we ground ourselves back into ourselves so we can keep moving in the regular world with our normal things we have to do. So in order to do that, we're going to do an easy grounding breath. And I call this the 4-element breath. I'm sure it's had other names, but it's pretty simple. With your eyes closed, you're going to take one inhale and exhale. And during that breath, the first one, you're going to notice what we call the earth parts of yourself. So the parts that are solid, the parts that feel like they don't move, the parts that feel stable or permanent. So you're going to take a deep breath. Inhale, feel your solidness, feel your weight, feel your heaviness. Exhale. For the next breath, we're going to notice our air qualities. So on this inhale and exhale, we're just noticing the parts of our body that are light. Notice the parts that are still. Notice the parts that are spacious. On your third breath, we move into water. So for this breath, we're noticing the rhythms and the wetness of our body. So your mouth, you'll notice the wetness. And then try to become aware of your heartbeat, any other rhythmic feeling in your body. So sometimes you can feel that sort of movement in other parts besides your heart. And then for our last part, we do the fire breath. On the inhale and exhale, you're going to notice the warmth of your body, the heat, and the energy. And then you can move through those breaths and cycle if you want more than once. Or if you feel like you need to stay with one element, you can do a few breaths of that. Listen to yourself and figure out what works best for you. Make sure to take some time to be with yourself and just come back to who you really are. And that's our practice for this week. Feel free to do it once, twice, or just take out elements that seem to work for what you need right now. The only person that knows what you need right now is you. So make sure you're listening to yourself and respecting what you need. And we'll be back next week with more.